Okay, guys, so today we're going to look at a while loop in Python. Loops are a structure designed to organize automation in a programming language. And essentially there are two types that we're going to be concerned about anyway, the while loop and the for loop. And we will see the differences as we describe each loop. You'll be able to determine how they are different. Besides the keyword, there's some different structures. But basically a while loop means what it says. While something is counting down, or while something is true, or while something is happening, do this. And a for loop, on the other hand, stands for every object in X collection, do this to that object until you get through all the way to the collection. So those are fundamentally the differences. Let's go ahead and go to the desktop. All right, so far what I've done is I've opened up a command prompt, and I'm going to change to our Python code folder. Oops, I haven't saved that yet though. We're going to do number 12 today. So opened up Notepad++. We're going to get rid of all this from the last, and we're going to save it as number 12. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The structure of a while loop is basically, it's pretty straightforward. Oops, stop flashing on me. I don't know what the world's going on here, but we're just going to do a real simple one to start off with. First thing you have to have is a counter of some kind. Generally, that's an integer variable, and we're going to, it doesn't matter what letter you use, but traditionally use I. And we're going to say I is equal to 1. We'll start counting at 1, even though that's not the traditional way to do things. Ordinarily, computers start counting at 0, but we're going to count at 1. And now we're going to say while I is less than 6. So that's the conditional. That is the condition. While I is less than 6, we're going to count 1 to 6. And while I is less than 6, that means we're going to do this 5 times, whatever it is we're going to do. So while I is less than 6, that's this I up here, we're going to do. Now you notice I put a colon at the end. This is just like an if-else statement. While I is less than 6, then do this. And I'm also going to indent, just like I did with the if statements. That's the key to Python's logic structures. You have to indent all the lines of the code block that you want to run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print I. I'm just going to print out the numbers, and basically it's going to count down until it gets to 5, because that's the only number less than 6. And then I'm also going to, I have to increment. Remember in operators we learned about incrementing? I'm going to use an increment statement here. I'm going to say I plus equals 1. And what that means is that every time this loop runs, I is going to add 1 to itself. So the first time it runs, it'll be 1. And then when the second time it runs, 1 plus 1 is 2, and 3, and so on until it finishes. And then what I'm going to do is, just like we did yesterday, I'm going to put a little message down here so that we'll know when the program finishes. So what happens is I does its loop, or pardon me, while Python does its while loop, it does the things here, and then once it's done, it moves on if there's anything else. So I've left something here to be done. So let's go ahead and save, and we're going to run it. Call this one underscore 12, right? .py. All right, and you'll notice what it did. It started off the first time. I was equal to 1. While I is less than 6, we're going to print I, so it printed 1. I plus equals 1, that means I added 1 to itself. Now I is equal to 2. It printed 2. It added 1 to itself to give us 3. It printed 3, added 1 to give us 4. It printed 4, added 1 to give us 5. Give us 5. Then it realized that if it went to the next number and checked up here, it said, oh, 6 is not less than 6. It's equal to 6. So we can't do that. And so at that point it stopped. It stopped running, and then we went on to the to the next line of code after the loop. So you notice it went ahead and printed program finished. So that is how a while loop works. Now let's do a little bit different here. So I changed our conditional. I went from I is less than 6 to I is less than or equal to 6. What do you suspect that it's going to do this time? What it did is exactly what we expected. It went through the loop, only this time when it got to 6, 6 is equal to 6, and so it went ahead and printed that. But it did not go any further. It didn't go on to 7. So at that point, we got program finished, and we have completed a while loop. There are lots of ways that you can use a while loop. Mainly, this is going to be for, well, if you're a video game programmer or have that aspiration, what you'll find is your entire game has to go into a while loop. Basically, it's called a game loop, and so your conditional is while game is equal to true, or while player is equal to alive. Use those Boolean statements. You don't have to use a number. You can, in fact, use a Boolean. You just have to make sure that you, at some point inside the loop, break the Boolean, change it to false, so that the game will end when the player dies or whatever happens. But that is just one example of when you'd ever use a while loop. Now, we can combine while loops and if statements, and this is generally what you would do. This is generally a thing that you would use one for. So let's go ahead and add a line here. We're going to add an if statement in here. And we're going to say if I is equal to 3, and we're going to use the keyword break. And what happens is when we break, that stops the loop and the code in the program continues. So what should happen is it should count 1, 2, 3, and then instead of continuing on, it should jump to the end. So let's try that and see if I got my if I got my abbreviations correct. And sure enough, I did. So 1, 2, 3. The program realized in our if statement that I was equal to 3, and so at that point it broke the loop, and we went to the end, and we finished up with the code that finishes our program. So we still run the while statement. We still started out with I equal 1, and then we checked our conditional. Well, I is still less than or equal to 6, so we printed the number 1. We checked our if statement. If I is equal to 3, well, it's not, so we skipped that. I is plus equal to 1. So at that point, we added 1 to 1 and got 2. Started the loop over again. While I is less than or equal to 6, I is only 2, so yes, it is. We printed 2. We checked our if statement. 2 is not equal to 3, so we skipped all that. We added 1 to 2. And now I is equal to 3, which is still less than equal to 6. We printed 3. But when we hit our if statement, we found out that 3 is equal to 3. And so we activated our break keyword. We ended the loop, and we went down to the end of the loop and continued on with our program, in which case that was this print statement program finished. So that is exactly what we did. Now there's another word that we can use in there. Let's see how we want to do this one. And basically it's just the opposite. It's the continue statement. So we're going to give an example of a continue statement. Let's change it up a little bit here. I is equal to 0 while I is less than 6. Oops, I'm going to do that. I plus equal 1. If I equal to 3, continue. print I. Now this may be a little bit confusing. So starting out, I is equal to 0. While I is less than or equal to less than 6, we're going to add 1 to I. I usually like to keep a space there. You don't have to. So if I is equal to 3, we're going to continue. I is not going to be equal to 3, so we're going to continue on past this if statement, and we're going to print I, so we should print a 0. Pardon me, we should print a 1. Then we'll come back. Now I is 1, it's still less than 6. We're going to add a 1 to it. That's going to make it 2. It's still not equal to 3, so we can skip that. And then we'll come down here and we'll print the 2. Let's just see what happens. I think it may be a little bit past what you expect. Okay, what it did was, it did the first 2. And then the third time it came around, I is now 3. Well, if I is equal to 3, what should we do? We went through the if statement, and it said continue. So that's what we did. We printed 3. Basically, this didn't have any impact on the loop at all, because it just says, in this case, if I is exactly equal to 3, then we're just going to continue doing what we do. We're going to print out 3 and keep on going. That's all the continuer does, whereas the break keyword breaks the loop and stops it. The keyword continues the loop. So what you'd use continue for is after your first conditional, if there's a chance that you didn't want the loop to break, but that there's a chance that your conditional might be true or false, you can put a continue in there, and that will keep your loop going, like if you needed that to happen. Occasionally, things like that occur. We can also use the else keyword like we did with the if statements. Let's say I is equal to 1 while I is less than 6. And we're going to increment. Now, put an else in here. And we're going to do print I is no longer less than 6. And that's what's going to happen. And then we're going to print program ends. All right, so it's going to go through until it gets past 6, and then when it gets when I is suddenly greater than 6, it will trigger the else statement, and when that happens, it will print I is no longer less than 6. The loop will end, and it will basically continue on. Now, you'd think that there's really not a need for this else statement, but there are times when it's handy, because there are times when you're going to do different code in here. So let's go ahead and save it. Let's make sure it behaves like we expect it to. Oops, did I misspelled something, didn't I? Indentation, yes. So I indented, or I didn't indent, rather. You still have to indent, that's my bad. Okay. See, that's that's one of those things with indentation. Now, curly blocks are still more complicated. All right, so we went to 1. We ran our loop. I started as 1. We printed I, incremented, checked our else. Nope, I is still within the loop parameters. So we came back around. Now I is 2, still less than 6. We printed it. We added something still within 3, 4, 5. When we got to 6, now I is no longer less than 6. So we came down here and ran our loop. We hit the else statement and we printed it. I is no longer less than 6. And then we ended the loop, went back into the main code of the program, and printed program ends. So essentially that is that is the basics of a while loop. Those are the main structures that you would ever, I guess, that you would ever use. I don't know of anything else we need to add to that right now. A little bit later, we may go into more detail when we start looking at different kinds of data structures. But that should do it for the moment. All right, guys, hope that was helpful. Go ahead and complete the exercise about while loops. Once you've got the exercise done, then you can use the Start Assignment button above to turn it in, and that should do it. If you have any questions, once again, I can be reached through the Canvas inbox. Have a good day. I'll see you in class.